Hi, all. First of all, thank you for joining the talk on Eclipse Xpanse, portable managed services to drive cloud autonomy. Yeah. Uh, to begin with, I am Swaroop. I am one of the project leads for Eclipse Xpanse, and I'm also one of the committers for this project. I work at the Huawei's Munich Research Center office.
Yep, and I'm Marco D'Angelo. I come from the open source program office, and with Swaroop, we are taking care of the Xpanse Eclipse that I was mentioning. So in this call, there will be a number of topics that we are going to touch, from the technical to the more programmatic ones.
Yeah, so begin with, the agenda would be that we discuss what Open Services Cloud is and what's the problem it's trying to solve, right? And then what's the solution that Open Services Cloud is proposing to this problem, and then we also see how Xpanse is trying to implement this solution, and we'll also do a small demo to have some more technical insights of the solution.
Yeah, and because the technical side is important, and we didn't want to just talk, but we want to show what the Xpanse project is. But after that, it's also important to understand how we engage. So it is not only important to know what we're doing, but we want to give the opportunity to ISVs, cloud solution provider, customer, even code committer to be involved in this project. So we will discuss a little bit of the talk and the last part of the talk, what we can do together. So I would say I will leave the stage to Swaroop to discuss the technical part, and then we will be with me discussing the kind of how to engage, what we do together, and what we are literally telling everyone that is passing by our booth. So Swaroop, this stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you. So first, let's understand what's Open Services Cloud is and what's the problem it's trying to address. Right? If you look at today's cloud services ecosystem, there are two predominant problems. Right? One is the lock-in problem, right, which is most often spoken about, and to briefly put it, it's a problem where a similar kind of service is available across different cloud providers, but still, as an end user, I cannot lift and shift my workloads across these cloud providers. Right? So basically, which means there is no service portability possible between cloud providers. That's the lock-in problem. And the other problem is the lock-out problem. This is not so often spoken about, but kind of interesting one according to me. So what's lockout? So today, when you log in into any cloud provider's console, right, in the management console, by default, the services, what you see, are the services from the cloud providers themselves. Right? What it means is the cloud providers are also acting as software vendors. Right? And the other part of this problem is they are the only software vendors who can also sell native managed services. Right? With native, what we mean is these are services which have full integration to their management console, to their API layer. They have their SDKs. They have all integrations possible to the infrastructure, to their billing, to their monitoring. Right? All this leads to the chain effect that it has better user experience. Right? It has better pricing, better configuration options. Right? And the other, which leads to the effect that the end users mostly end up consuming these services from the cloud providers themselves. Right? So what this does is that this is locking out the other software vendors out of this native managed services ecosystem. Right? They cannot simply deliver such services. The only option today they have is via marketplaces or via their SaaS portals. Right? And these SaaS portals, again, it's another ball game. They need to then manage the entire stack. So in any case, neither of these solutions are offering native services, nor they are fully managed. Right? So these are the two major problems that OSC is trying to address, Open Services Cloud. One is the lockout, where the end customer is lock-in, when customer is impacted, and lockout, where the software vendors they are locked out of this ecosystem. Yeah. To understand this problem a bit more clearer, right? One good example or an easy analogy is to compare cloud today with what iPhone was back in 2007 when it was launched. Right? Back then, the only apps the iPhone had were the apps from Apple themselves. Right? If you wanted to consume any other service, the only way you could do was via web apps, the browser. Right? That's exactly today with the lockout problem. The only services available native are from the cloud providers themselves. Anybody else comes from other channels. That's how comparable it is. And then back then, also with iPhone, you could not really port your data out of your phone. Right? That's the lock-in problem today. Right? That this example helps us to understand the depth of this current problem. Right? Yeah. So what does OSC suggest in this case? So Open Services Cloud proposes to bring in a new software layer between the software vendors and the cloud providers called the Open Services Cloud Runtime. And what this does is, on the northbound of this layer, we will have cloud agnostic APIs for the software vendors to like sell or register the services, what they intend to sell, right? And on the southbound, we will have integrations to all the management APIs of the respective cloud provider, which are necessary to be like configured to sell a native managed service. Like for example, if the service needs to be added to the cloud provider's catalog, a service needs to be configured in billing with their prices, right? Some infrastructure needs to be prepared for the service to be sold, and so on and so forth. So all these management system configurations, like all integrations, will be available on the southbound. So if you look at this example, a service vendor who want to sell a SAP managed service registers his service to OSC APIs, and which will then invoke all the necessary integrations on the back end of the cloud provider, and the service then at the end lands in the same service catalog where the cloud provider services also exist, which means for the end user there is just one single place to consume services from. Like all services come in one single place, and all services are fully native, fully managed. And now he also has like more choices to choose from, right? He has more options for him to choose from. And for software vendor, the advantage is now even everybody can sell native managed services. And for the cloud providers, there is a win-win situation wherein more of the infrastructure is consumed. They can also have like revenue sharing between the cloud, between the software vendors, right? So that's Open Services Cloud solution at a very, very high level. Okay. Now, what is Eclipse Xpanse then? Right? Eclipse Xpanse is an Open Services Cloud project. As the name says, it's under Eclipse Foundation. And what we do here is that we are trying to implement an OSC-based framework to offer a way to offer and consume native managed services, which are also fully portable. Right? So if you look at the diagram here, it's a very, very high-level view of what Xpanse is currently doing. So similar to OSC, here on the northbound, we are building cloud agnostic APIs for not just for software vendors. Here we are just extending it a bit. We also have some APIs for the service cloud providers, for end users, and also for the administrators. And on the southbound, we are building something called as plugins for each cloud provider, right? And these plugins have all the integrations necessary to the management systems of the respective cloud provider, which will then basically configure the native managed services so that then the end user can consume it. Right? On the orchestrator or the main runtime, what you see, it has a lot of other building blocks, such as it has the deployer, it has some observability instrumentation available, and caching, for example. Basically, all that is necessary for us to deploy Xpanse in a productive setup. So it comes with all batteries included. One important thing to keep in mind is Xpanse can be deployed in two different constellations. One is that basically what OSC proposes is you take the API layer, the runtime, and just a plugin for a specific cloud provider. You package this part, and you will deploy them on the management layer of every cloud of that cloud provider. So every cloud provider deploys their own part of OSC with their plugin, which means that cloud provider becomes OSC compatible or Xpanse compatible. So, but the APIs are same, only the backend plugins are different. Right? This is one way of deploying it. Or the other way is you pack all plugins together, deploy it somewhere outside any of the cloud provider's management layer. Right? Then you can run it as an app store kind of a setup, wherein cloud providers can, like software vendors can sell services across multiple cloud providers. End users can choose and compare and like buy services on whichever cloud they want. So we will do a live demo wherein we will specifically use the second setup. That's the possible setup, and also setup which can be explained better. We will show how Xpanse can be used in an app store kind of setup. Yeah. Uh, I'll just quickly switch to the other page.
Then you have to bring it there.
Coming there? Where is it? Yeah. So
Okay.
one of the main things what we are implementing with Xpanse is the Xpanse service description language. So this is a simple YAML text file with a data model behind it, where a service vendor can describe his service, right? From basic information such as service name up to complex information such as things that a deployment script or configuration information, right? Everything that's necessary to deploy a service and manage its full life cycle. So just as an example, you see, we are here having simple information like to which category the service belongs to, right? What's the name of the service? So this is an example service of a software vendor who has his own Kubernetes cluster flavor, wants to sell this service on Huawei cloud, right? So it says on this for which cloud, Huawei cloud, and then for which region he wants to sell them, and on what billing modes he wants to offer. So here he says he wants to offer both. And we have service flavors, basically, which says the t-shirt sizes of the service. So each flavor then has a bunch of configuration, pricing, resources information, right? And then it also has some information on what's the impact of upscaling, downscaling services. And then we have the deployer information. So in this case, he says he wants to use Terraform to deploy, right? And then he describes the variables. Variables are nothing but the parameters that the end user has to provide for the service to be deployed, right? Again, here we have a lot of combinations covered, like the variables can be mandatory, optional. What's the type of the variable? Are they sensitive, not sensitive? Is there a pattern? Is there a default value? So you have covered, it covers a lot of options. And then we also have a deployer script. Basically, since it tells Terraform, they need to provide a Terraform script. And this script can either be inline in this file or can reside in some Git repository, which will be checked out by the deployer. This is a pretty simple example, I would say, of what a description file would look like. And so now I will, for the demonstration purpose, I will simply use our UI component to demonstrate the features. So you need not. Sorry, let me. So the environment is protected with OAuth. Like I mentioned, if you run Xpanse inside a cloud provider's management layer, you don't need auth. Probably don't even need this UI, because it will all be the cloud provider's UI, cloud provider's IAM, authentication, everything. So we need an auth provider because we're running it outside a cloud provider. So this is only when you want to run it in the. Let me close this. Yeah. So we have also RBAC implemented. So I will first go to the ISV role. For demo purpose, my user actually has access to all roles. So as a software vendor, when I log into the UI, I see these options wherein I can view what services I'm already selling. Right? For example, I see this software vendor is already selling some compute service, some special virtual machine, right? And he's already selling on multiple clouds, right? And you can see the status, and also you can see, for example, here, this service is already consumed by 2 customers, right? And this just shows the information what I showed earlier with the service template, right? There's nothing extra added here, because the GUI has no logic. The GUI is just a very thin wrapper written in React, which just consumes the Xpanse APIs, right? And the service vendor can also define some service policies, which are nothing but the OPA policies, which will be executed before the service deployment. So if he needs to add some checks, some kind of tests to see whether the service really creates the necessary resources that is needed, this can be injected here, right? And then, for example, we see in the container, he says that, oh, he's already selling a Kubernetes service on only one of the clouds. So now we want to add the same service on Huawei cloud, for example, which the file which we saw earlier. So what we do, we go to the register panel, we just select the file. I cannot see. Yeah. So this is the file. As soon as I upload, it just parses to the YAML file and shows basically what data is there in the file. The GUI does nothing else. Now when I click on register, the request goes to the backend, which then validates the YAML file with the data model, and then once these checks are done, it also then sends the request to the plugin. Plugin has to then verify whether it wants to allow this service on its cloud or not, with whatever checks it needs, and then it can either auto approve the service, right, or it can put it to a manual queue where someone has to then check and approve the request. Right now you see the request is added, right? What did I register? Sorry, I cannot see this. I did the wrong one. Anyways. So the service I added was a database service, I suppose. Yeah, so it's here. You see the service is added, but it's in approval pending, which means a CSP the cloud provider basically has to check and approve the service. Right? So until he approves the service, is not available for the end user to consume. It will not land in any of the catalogs. So I just switch to my CSP role. Right here, I can see which of my services are approved. I can see that 2 have approved, already available. I just take this. I can either approve or reject or whatever. So this can be either automated or any manual checks can be injected to this. Right. So next, I switch to the end user role. So now as an end user, I can see the full catalog. I can see what services are available in the App Store. Right. So I can see that there's a compute service. There's only one service, virtual machine, and I see that it's available to be. I can choose between whichever cloud provider I want. I can compare, and I can then deploy it on the respective cloud. Right. So similarly, in my services, I can see the services which I've already deployed, the status of them. So here I prepared some data for the demo. So you see some services are already running, some are already destroyed. Right, on the monitor, you can then say you can monitor the services. Credentials, you will see on which tenants the services should be created on. And policies, the user can also have user level OPA policies. Right? So one is the service vendor can have his own policies, and on the other side, even user can have his own policies. Basically, if in case he does not want a certain type of resource to be created, he can just add such checks here. If the service tries to create them, the service deployment will simply fail here. Right? So for the sake of the demo and to save some time, I will take the simplest service. Right? I will simply try to deploy a virtual machine on Regio Cloud, which is one of the small cloud providers in Germany. I will try to deploy a small VM there to see. So basically, if you see this form, whatever you see here, it's all generated dynamically with the service template. Right? Just one file which has all the data, which leads to generation of all this information on the UI. Right? There is nothing extra or any external data coming from any other source. Right? So I do next. I can just provide. So this variable form is again coming from the file what we uploaded. When I click on deploy. So when I click on deploy, the request goes to backend. Again, there is a set of validations that runs, whether we check whether this flavor is valid, whether these parameters are valid, right? And then we run the OPA checks. If there are any policies are available, we validate them. If that is done, and then we send the request to deployer. Right? Then the deployer starts to deploy it. The deployer again can be two varieties. One, it can either the orchestrator can itself do some deployments, or the orchestrator can hand it over to an external microservice. So in this environment, we have microservice, so it just hands over the request. Once deployed, the response comes back saying that either deployed with the details of the state of the deployment. If it fails, it gives the exception information back. Right? So for example, here you see the service was deployed. It just then says, okay, this was the password, what was created for the VM, and this is the IP. Right? So it parses the information out of the deployer. So And then when you go to My Services, you can see the details again, right? And in My Services, he can manage the complete life cycle of the service. So for example, he can either destroy the service, right? He can scale service. So with scale, you can see that it says, okay, what's the current flavor? He can just see whether he can switch to another flavor of the service, right? Or he can even modify some parameter. He can migrate services. So migrate is where he will switch the service between from this cloud provider to another cloud provider, right? Whether you want to, again here we provide multiple options to switch, right? For example, I say next, it says that, see there's only one, then I say to another cloud provider, then it shows, okay, where do you want to go? Take your VM to, right? So that's the migrate option, right? And then you have destroy, which will delete the service. Then you can stop and start services. Stop and start will basically restart or stop the compute resources behind the service, right? And then for monitoring, I will just pick another service, other cloud, because Regio Cloud does not expose the monitoring metrics. So I'll just take another Huawei service. So with monitoring, again, we are currently, like I mentioned, for services to be really native, the cloud provider must start exposing their management APIs to OSC or Xpanse. Right? Once it starts to expose, then we can build integrations on top of it. So in case of Huawei Cloud, the monitoring metrics are exposed, so we can now like build these graphs, or you can show this data. Right? So that's how the monitoring is then displayed. Yeah. So that's one thing. So these are the main use cases. So we saw what a software, what a software vendor can do, right? I'll just go back once more, just to show you that software vendor can manage the complete life cycle of this of the service he wants to offer, right? It's not just registering. So if, for example, he says he wants to make some changes, he can update this service configuration. Right? He can also unregister the service, means the service will be taken out of the catalog, right? Or he can put it back again, or he can delete them. So the complete life cycle is managed. Similarly, for the end user, again he can manage the complete life cycle of service from creation to destroy, modify, scale, change configurations, change flavors, right? Everything is possible. So the other only last missing part is the admin user. So basically here you can see the complete stack, like all systems involved in the Xpanse stack. And with the implementation what we currently have, even though the stack has so many components, none of them is mandatory, right? For example, if we have an open telemetry collector, if you don't want, we can simply disable it, or we can plug in some other instrumentation to it, right? And then same with Terraform boot. So Terraform boot, Tofu maker, these are two other small projects within Xpanse what we are building, just to put Terraform and OpenTofu behind a REST wrapper, so that we can outsource or asynchronously deploy the services. Again, if you don't want, we can disable it. The orchestrator itself will also have deployer tools. Right? And Policyman, it's another, again, small service or a microservice what we are building as a wrapper to OPA policy checks. Right? Cache provider, again, by default we are using a Caffeine cache, which is a local cache within the JVM. It can again we can also replace it with Redis or any other cache. Right? Same with identity provider, we're using Ztadel here. Can be any auth provider which supports OAuth. If not OAuth, we can even switch it to some other authentication mechanism. Same with database, MySQL is there, but not mandatory. You can switch to any other database provider. Right? So that's about the live demo. And this is the stack. So we saw the front end. What you saw now is built on React, right? Basically using white build tool, and all the documentation is on Docusaurus. And the backend, what you saw, the main runtime APIs are all implemented using Java based on Spring Boot, right? And then we also have small components using Go. For example, the Policyman, what I said, is a Golang based project. We are also now building agents for VMs, so that we can push configuration changes or pull configuration changes. Again, we are building using Golang, and all our APIs are following Open API standards, right? And yeah, you can see the for deployers currently, like I mentioned, we are using Terraform, OpenTofu, and also Ansible for configurations. These are all ever growing list. It's evolving with every sprint, with every new features coming in. We're adding new things to Eclipse Xpanse. And next is the enabling tech. Like I mentioned, we have OPA, we have OpenTelemetry, we are using Zitadel. Activities, what is our workflow engine? So where we'll be slowly moving all complex workflows to activity so that we have better control. Good example is this service portability. If you want to port service from one provider to other, we need to first export data, right? Then import data, then start service on other side, then destroy another side. So we want to do it via workflow so that if something fails, we can just start from where we want, or we can even skip some failure, something like that. Yeah. So
Yep.
that's the demo. Yes.
Yeah, and as you have seen, Xpanse is based on a pretty modern stack. So the technology is here. It's our open source. It's, as you can notice from the upright corner, governed by Eclipse Foundation. Now, the fact that we have a project that is under the Eclipse Foundation umbrella, that is trying to solve a very specific issue in some cases, but to give also an opportunity to, we said, cloud solution provider, customer, software vendors, not to be tied to some specific technology, not to be tied to some specific providers, even to make it easier to deploy resources, deploy entire complexity stacks, and to move around. It's a thing that I think has merit in the way that one of the statistics and one of the study that the Eclipse Foundation has done last year showed us that 88% of the, let me say, whole migration projects that happen in Europe are happening toward not European cloud provider, but they're landing and targeting bigger hyperscaler that have nothing to do with Europe. So those providers that are not giving back so much to European community in terms of whatever, opportunity, jobs, and giving back also for the open source stack. So what we are gonna do, we are not stopping here with Xpanse, but we are looking for the possibility to have everyone collaborate at scale on the project and on the issue that the project is trying to find. So what we're gonna do, what we are trying to achieve is to form a working group inside the Eclipse Foundation that will address this very topic. I mean, we have got the name of the working group still to be hammered, but it's by definition related to cloud solution providers and the services that are considered to be cloud native. Working group are kind of a standard stuff that are used by Eclipse Foundation and other entities to govern a process. Why we want to create this kind of structure? Because we believe that Xpanse it's an interesting building block of the open service cloud vision, but we need a little bit more. And what we're gonna do is try to push this vision not only to deal with the complexity of the provisioning and the orchestration, but to go after something way more articulated. So we were going to create a working group. We are right now talking with a number of solution providers, with a number of ISVs and entity to participate to the creation of an open platform to collaborate on that. What will be the purpose? The purpose will be basically the 8 values that you can see here that are literally bolted in what we consider important and critical. So drive and foster open source implementation of those concepts, promote a vendor neutral marketing where, or marketing approach there, everyone will get the fair share of a possibility to drive their application in the stack and the providers that they want. And as I said, the number of the technology that are thinking about to put together to address this issue are not only related to Xpanse. We were scouting and talking with, as I said, different entity inside the European market. So how to deal with authentication, how to deal with attestation and conformity assessment profile that you have been listening also to other talk that has been done here in the same conference, up to until the, let me say, hypervisor technology that can be used. So those are examples of European projects that are being evaluated right now and are to be discussed if they can take part of this working group or not. What is our ask and what is our offering? The offering is to for ISVs, for institutions, for a cloud solution provider to be part of the working group that is going to be formed in the next few weeks or months and deal with the 4 main topics. Managing and addressing, as I said, the virtualization, orchestration, observability, identity and access, and service dependency. Foster the cloud portability across various cloud provider, managing the multi-cloud approach in terms of service, not only porting, but maintain the smooth integration and smooth functionality when we move from one cloud to another, and at the end, maintaining and guaranteeing a kind of a conformity and quality assurance that leads to trust and reliability, not discounting the SLA, the service level agreement. So that will be part of the discussion that we are pushing, as I said, with market, institution and stuff. And it's the same story that we are telling at our booth. So the invitation for everyone that is interested and that is present in the OCX 24, it's pay a visit to the booth. There will be me and Zwarup that are dealing with the technical detail, the implementation detail, and the regulatory part that makes interesting to have this kind of discussion those days in Europe. And at the end of the day, even if we got ideas, not only the intention to participate in the working group, please share your feedback. Feedback is important because it gives us the possibility to understand what is the direction that the interesting party and actors in the market are going to be. It gives us the possibility to prioritize our roadmap in terms of feature, in terms of what you saw. It's already a working model, and I don't want to say production ready, but it's an interesting MVP that is basically a reference architecture of what the OSC is, and it will give the possibility to not only transform in a mature proposition, but also start getting traction, at least if it's not right now in production, in the roadmap of the implementation of the cloud solution provider and customers across Europe. I would say that that is basically the main topics that we wanted to share. As I said before, didn't want to have just a discussion about what it is, what it could be, but the demo was an important part to show you that it's real. There is code that can be tested, evaluated, even started to deploy in some of the laboratory or production stuff. I would say that is more or less everything from our side.
So, thank you.
And yeah, if you want to see what is the home page of the project, scan this QR code, you will land on the Eclipse Foundation project page, where you get the possibility and the access to the repo that is obviously open. You will get the possibility to download the code, test it, and see with your own eyes how it is conforming with your idea. And that's it, I would say, for today. Thank you so much. We are available at the booth, or connect with us with any other means, LinkedIn, and through the profile that we showed at the start to continue this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Okay.